God rest his soul, was a great man to me. He was a great, great booster of mine.
Don Rickles walked to the microphone and stopped. It was Dean Martin's funeral. The chapel at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park had fallen so quiet that the faint hum of ventilation drifted overhead. Nearly 300 mourners sat in dark wooden pews, waiting as Rickles stood frozen before them. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes stared somewhere beyond the crowd. The hands that had spent 4 decades slicing through audiences with sharp jokes and fearless insults hung motionless at his sides. What unfolded over the next minute was not simply a comedian losing his composure. It revealed something deeper, a friendship rarely understood by the public and a debt never openly spoken about.
Yeah, Dean was great. And, it's a mystery. Everybody thought he was boozed up. Well, that's not true. Really. He put that on, but he was a charming, lovable guy. He really was.
Beneath Dean Martin's polished image, easy charm, and famously relaxed smile, there was a side of him few people dared describe honestly. When Rickles finally found his voice, several mourners would later admit they suddenly understood something about Dean Martin they had somehow missed for years. The date was December 28th, 1995. 3 days earlier, on Christmas morning, Dean Martin had died at his Beverly Hills home at age 78. The official cause was acute respiratory failure following years of lung cancer and emphysema. There were no bright showroom lights, no applause, no final curtain call. Dean died quietly in a home that had grown silent long before his final breath. Frank Sinatra could not attend. Barbara Sinatra came instead, and those close to Frank understood what that absence meant. Dean was more than a friend to him. He was family by choice. Somewhere else in Los Angeles, Sinatra remained overcome with grief. Jerry Lewis flew in from Denver, leaving a stage role in Damn Yankees Behind to be there. Angie Dickinson attended. Shirley MacLaine came. Bob Newhart sat with his wife, and Don Rickles arrived. That guest list carried its own sadness. The Rat Pack the world once celebrated had already begun fading years earlier. Peter Lawford died in 1984. Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990. Now Dean Martin was gone too.
I want you to hit me. I'll press charges. What do you think of that? I want you to lay a hand on me, dummy. You'll have a lot of trouble on your hands.
Those seated inside the chapel understood they were witnessing more than a funeral. They were watching the closing chapter of an era that had been slipping away piece by piece for years. Don Rickles sat in the third row holding the funeral program tightly in both hands. He was 69 and had spent nearly 4 decades in entertainment without ever struggling for words. He mocked presidents, mob figures, and fellow performers with equal confidence. On The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, he turned even the host's desk into part of the act. He teased Frank Sinatra without hesitation and made audiences roar by saying the things others would never dare say aloud. To Frank Sinatra's face in a Miami Beach nightclub in 1957, Don Rickles delivered the line that would become legend. "Make yourself at home, Frank. Hit somebody." Sinatra nearly fell off his stool laughing. For Don Rickles, words had always been enough. They were his weapon, sharpened through decades of nightly performances until they became one of the sharpest instruments in American comedy. And yet, before Dean Martin's funeral, those same words abandoned him. Barbara Rickles would later remember her husband sitting at the kitchen table 2 nights before the service, long past 2 in the morning. A legal pad sat in front of him, mostly empty. She asked what he was working on. "I'm trying to figure out what to say," he told her. She asked what the problem was. After a long silence, he answered quietly, "Everything I've got is wrong." She did not press him. She understood.
You young people, if you don't know, he was the greatest in the world. He really was.
Think about what that meant for a man like Don Rickles. For 40 years, preparation had never been his style. He improvised faster than most comedians could deliver written material. He built a career on instinct, timing, and fearless spontaneity. Yet here he was, staring at blank paper he could not fill. That was not stage fright. fact, it was something heavier. And to understand why, you have to go back to the beginning of the story between Rickles and Dean Martin. Most people know the familiar version of how Don Rickles became famous. It starts with Frank Sinatra. In 1957, Rickles was performing at a Miami Beach nightclub, struggling through an act that many audiences considered too sharp and too aggressive for the time. Most entertainers would have softened their material. Rickles did the opposite. He looked straight at Sinatra and fired off the joke that instantly became part of Hollywood history. Sinatra loved it. He laughed so hard he nearly slid off his stool, then began bringing celebrities to see Rickles perform. His endorsement opened doors and gave Rickles credibility in powerful circles. That version of the story became Rickles' favorite talk show anecdote and followed him for the rest of his career. But it leaves out the part that mattered most.
I'll tell you something, Dean.
What?
You think people are crazy about you? They're not crazy about you. They think you're Tony Martin.
Sinatra opened the door. Dean Martin built the home behind it. Beginning in the mid-1960s, Rickles became one of the most frequent guests on The Dean Martin Show. Across 9 successful seasons, among the highest-rated programs in America, Dean welcomed him back repeatedly. And he did not do it because it was safe. He did it because he understood Rickles in a way others did not. Insult comedy on network television in 1965 required something fragile and rare. Audiences had to trust the performer. More importantly, the target had to genuinely enjoy being targeted. Dean Martin possessed that quality better than almost anyone. His public image was built on calm confidence. Drink in hand, smile barely moving, he carried himself like a man impossible to shake. No matter what chaos surrounded him, Dean appeared untouched by it. That made him the perfect partner for Rickles. When Rickles attacked Dean with jokes on national television, Dean laughed. Not rehearsed laughter, not television politeness, real laughter, the kind that made him lean back in his chair and lose control for a moment while cameras caught every second.
And he'd send all the wives, he'd send the wives, go to bed. You got to go to bed, and you got to sit with him and drink the vodka, which I didn't mind, but on the third barrel.
And that reaction changed everything. It told audiences they were watching affection, not cruelty. It told them Dean Martin was completely secure. Most of all, it revealed something people rarely understood about Rickles' comedy, that beneath the insults was trust, and beneath the mockery was genuine closeness. Frank Sinatra understood power. Dean Martin understood ease, and that ease was exactly what Don Rickles needed to do his best work. Hold on to a question because it matters to everything that follows. Why did Dean Martin keep that door open for Rickles year after year for nearly 15 years? What did he see in Don Rickles that made him willing to become the most reliable target on American television without asking for recognition or repayment? The answer is not obvious, and it explains far more than most people realized.
To be in his company was so great, and I never knew what the hell he was saying. But he was great. He was.
By 1973, the celebrity roast specials had become a major NBC event. Running through 1984 and drawing massive audiences, the roasts turned into a cultural institution. Rickles stood at the center of them. But Dean Martin sat at the head of the table. That detail mattered. Dean created the atmosphere where Rickles could perform at full force before the entire country. He built that environment carefully and never drew attention to his role in creating it. That was the real debt between them. Not money, not influence, not some favor exchanged behind closed doors. The debt was this. Dean Martin spent years building the professional stage where Don Rickles could become fully himself, and he never once demanded credit for it.
Yeah, I'm talking about the tender Don Rickles, warm and gentle, a loving human being.
Keep a second question beside the first. What was Dean Martin hiding beneath the cool exterior? Because there was always something underneath. The drink, the relaxed smile, the famous image of not caring. It covered something deeper, not as manipulation or dishonesty, but as a lifelong habit. That answer comes later. Away from cameras, their friendship was far simpler than television suggested. People who knew both men described it the same way. They made each other laugh effortlessly. In 1969, during a Western sketch on the Dean Martin Show, Rickles played a saloon bartender while Dean walked in and ordered milk. Dean Martin ordering milk. Rickles fired back immediately. He should get an Academy Award for reading that line. The studio exploded. And if you watch closely, there is a revealing moment. For 2 seconds before the laughter arrives, Dean's expression changes. He had not expected the joke. The polished television mask slips, replaced by something spontaneous and completely genuine. Then the performer returns. Rickles noticed it. The exchange between them was not simply comic timing between guest and host. It was two men who genuinely found each other funny without effort or calculation. That was the real foundation beneath everything. Not contracts, not ratings, and not career strategy. Real affection. But underneath that laughter, another clock had already started running.
And there isn't a person in this room tonight, up here, on the dais, or sitting in this beautiful room, who'll disagree with that.
On March 21st, 1987, Dean Martin's son, Dean Paul Martin, died when his F-4 Phantom jet crashed into Mount San Gorgonio during a California Air National Guard training flight. He was 35. The tragedy carried an almost unbearable irony. It happened on the same mountain where Frank Sinatra's mother had died in a plane crash exactly 10 years earlier. For Dean Martin, the loss changed something permanent. And that moment stood 8 years and 9 months before the funeral chapel on December 28, 1995. A countdown nobody could see unfolding. For decades, Dean had perfected the image of emotional distance. He made detachment look effortless. Audiences saw the drink, the smile, the relaxed indifference, and assumed they were seeing the whole man. They were not. Because after losing his son, the man who seemed impossible to wound was suddenly carrying a grief no performance could fully conceal. One breath changed everything. The armor Dean Martin had worn for decades had no answer for this kind of loss. He was a man who could walk into any room and own it without effort, but grief was different. There was no script for it, no performance to hide behind. And Dean Martin did not know how to mourn in public, so he stopped appearing in public at all. In 1988, he withdrew from the Together Again tour with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. after only a handful of performances. He returned home and stayed there. Life became smaller. Most evenings followed the same routine. He ordered pasta from the same Italian restaurant and sat watching westerns on television. There were no new recordings, no tours, no hunger for attention. Then came the lung cancer diagnosis in 1993. Dean absorbed the news with the same distant calm that had defined the years after 1987. Not dramatic, not visibly frightened, just quieter, moving further inward in a way that never reversed. This is the part many obituaries failed to understand. When Sammy Davis Jr. died in May 1990, something shifted again. People close to Dean said he grew even more withdrawn. Peter Lawford had already been gone since 1984. Now Sammy was gone too. The Rat Pack had become, in essence, Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra. And even seeing Sinatra had become painful. Because every room they entered together carried the weight of who was missing. The laughter was still remembered, but the absences had become louder. Notice something important here. Don Rickles kept showing up, not publicly, not for cameras or publicity. He called, he visited. He sat with Dean in Beverly Hills during long, quiet evenings. That matters more than it sounds. Rickles had built his entire life around performance. He entertained, provoked, and filled silence with precision. Yet Dean had reached a stage where he no longer needed entertainment. And still, Rickles came. While others gradually called less often and drifted into distance, he remained present. That brings us back to the question waiting beneath this story. During those visits, those quiet nights with no audience and no spotlight, what did Don Rickles actually say to Dean Martin? Not the stage version, not the insult comic, the real man, if there was one. Keep that question beside the others, because the answer matters before this story ends. Across those 8 years, Rickles watched Dean slowly disappear. Not all at once. Gradually, like daylight leaving a room so slowly you fail to notice exactly when darkness arrived. He watched Dean's famous ease, the relaxed confidence people believed was permanent, begin to reveal itself as something more fragile than anyone realized. That ease had always lived inside certain conditions: the work, the audiences, the rhythm of performance. Once those disappeared, something essential disappeared with them. What remained was simply a man inside a quiet Beverly Hills house. Pasta, westerns, no longer expecting anything from the world. And in a way that felt both peaceful and heartbreaking at once, Dean Martin spent his final years needing less and less from anyone around him. Then, on Christmas morning, 1995, it ended. Dean Martin died at home in Beverly Hills. He died on December 25th. The man who once filled Las Vegas showrooms to capacity, who had entertained millions and commanded television audiences few performers could dream of, left the world in silence, far removed from the noise that had once surrounded him. Dean Martin died on the quietest morning of the year, and for nearly 8 years before that, his world had been growing smaller. That silence is what made the 3 days between Christmas and his funeral feel so unusually heavy. The news spread first through Los Angeles, then through the private phone lines connecting people who had shared decades together. Frank Sinatra received the call and, by nearly every account, disappeared into grief. Not absent, simply unreachable. Jerry Lewis was performing in Denver when he heard. He immediately headed for the airport. Barbara Sinatra handled arrangements. Las Vegas began preparing its own tributes. And Don Rickles got the call on Christmas morning while surrounded by family. He set the phone down and entered a struggle he could not solve. Across the 72 hours between Dean's death and burial, Rickles searched for words. He sat with a legal pad. He wrote lines, crossed them out, started again, nothing survived. At one point, he called Bob Newhart, perhaps the only friend whose calm steadiness he trusted when performance offered no shelter. Newhart said what a good friend says when there is no solution to offer, and Rickles put the pad down again, because what those 72 hours demanded from him was not merely grief, it was precision. Every version failed for the same reason. It used the wrong language. The insult comic, the persona America knew, could not appear at Dean Martin's funeral. To do so would betray something their friendship and public chemistry had always quietly protected. But sentimental speeches felt wrong, too. Dean Martin would have rejected them immediately. That is something many people misunderstood about him. Dean did not distrust emotion. He distrusted performed emotion. There was a difference, and few people understood it better. That realization finally answered the question waiting beneath this story. What had Don Rickles actually brought to those quiet visits in Beverly Hills? Not jokes, not performance, not entertainment. He brought presence. He arrived. He sat beside Dean, and he stayed. For a man built entirely around timing, punchlines, and control, that may have been the hardest gift he could offer. And strangely enough, it was exactly what Dean Martin could accept. Sometime around 2 a.m. before the funeral, Rickles finally understood what the microphone was asking of him. He did not need a better speech. He did not need to redirect the act. He needed to abandon it. For 40 years, comedy had been the machine that protected him. It allowed him to say difficult things while pretending none of them mattered. Now he had to stop that machine entirely. No disguise, no cleverness, just the truth, plain and exposed. He arrived at the chapel the next morning with nothing written down. And even then, seated in the third row with the funeral program resting in his hands, he still did not know exactly what he would say when called forward. The chapel carried the muted atmosphere of a December morning in Los Angeles. Winter light filtered softly through the north windows, gray around the edges beneath an overcast sky. The air held a coolness that surprised people unfamiliar with Southern California winters. Everything felt subdued. White flower arrangements framed the front of the chapel. Dean's casket rested nearby. His family filled the forward rows. Children, grandchildren, former wives, generations gathered together. 300 mourners sat quietly inside dark wooden pews. The room held almost no sound at all, only careful breathing, an occasional shifting seat, and the faint creak of the old chapel settling around them. Jerry Lewis spoke first. He did not hide his grief. There was no performance in it and no attempt at composure. He wept openly for the man who had once been his partner, rival and brother, in ways few people fully understood. Jerry Lewis wept openly. Old grief and new grief blended together until the room accepted it without discomfort or embarrassment. His voice cracked more than once, and no one looked away. It felt right that someone should mourn Dean Martin so honestly. Then Don Rickles stood and walked toward the microphone. He moved the way he always had, shoulders slightly forward, eyes moving across the room, the walk of a man who had entered thousands of rooms and claimed them through sheer presence. He adjusted the microphone. Then he said nothing. 10 seconds passed. For Don Rickles, 10 seconds of silence before an audience was unimaginable. In any ordinary performance, he would already have delivered several jokes and controlled the room completely. But this was different. The silence did not feel uncomfortable. It felt suspended. 300 people sat waiting as Rickles made a decision in real time, standing without protection and with nowhere to hide. Remember the questions that had followed this story from the beginning. Why had Dean Martin kept the door open for Rickles for so many years? And what had Dean been hiding beneath the cool exterior? The answer arrived not through explanation, but through what Rickles finally said. When he spoke, his voice was softer than anyone there had ever heard. He said Dean Martin had given him everything, not as exaggeration, as fact. Yes, Frank Sinatra had opened the first door. Everyone knew that story. But Dean Martin had built the room behind it and kept building it year after year, giving Rickles a place where he could perform at full power before the entire country. Rickles said that every time he walked onto a stage and delivered the dangerous joke, every time audiences laughed instead of recoiled, he had been standing inside a structure Dean created and protected. Then he admitted something even harder. He said he had thanked Dean many times before, in interviews, on television, through jokes and stories. But those thanks had belonged to performance. The kind of gratitude spoken while the machine is still running. Rickles finally understood something he had never said plainly before. Dean Martin had done all of it from a place where giving cost him nothing. Not because it was effortless, but because generosity was part of who he was beneath the cool image and practiced indifference. Dean built rooms for people, helped them thrive, and then laughed as if those rooms had always existed. The chapel stayed silent after Rickles finished, and in that silence, the second question found its answer. What had Dean Martin been hiding beneath the cool all those years? Not emptiness, not cynicism, the opposite. A generosity so natural that he disguised it as indifference because the king of cool could not openly wear his heart on his sleeve. So Dean gave quietly. He built space for Rickles to succeed. He stood beside Sammy Davis Jr. when loyalty carried real consequences. He helped hold the Rat Pack together through years when personalities and tempers made that difficult. He showed up for people, looked the other way when kindness required it, and never demanded recognition. That was what Rickles named at the microphone without ever saying it directly. The funeral on December 28, 1995, felt like the final stop in a journey that had truly begun with the death of Dean Paul Martin years earlier. That evening, Las Vegas paid tribute. At 7 o'clock, casinos along the Strip dimmed their lights for 10 minutes. The Sands, the Flamingo, the Stardust, the neon world the Rat Pack helped define softened into silence. Not darkness, just dimmed. Like a room lowering its voice after hearing something important. And that night, the first question found its answer too. Why had Dean Martin kept the door open for Don Rickles for 15 years when easier performers were available? The answer was surprisingly simple. Rickles could still surprise him. Dean Martin understood nearly everyone around him. Sinatra, Davis, Lewis. He knew their rhythms and personalities so well. He often anticipated them before they spoke. But Rickles was different. His speed, unpredictability, and instinct made him impossible to fully read. For a man whose career depended on always knowing the room, that surprise was rare and valuable. It made Dean's laughter real. You can see it in old footage, the drink lowering, the sudden crack in the cool expression before the laugh escapes. That genuine surprise may have been what Dean loved most. One man gave ease, the other gave surprise. Together they created something neither could have built alone. Not merely television, not merely fame. A friendship that survived beyond cameras and applause, lasting into the quieter years when much of the world that shaped them had already faded away. What remained was simpler. Two men who recognized something familiar in each other. Don Rickles lived another 22 years and worked almost until the end. The famous machine never disappeared. The timing, the speed, the strange magic that made audiences feel both attacked and strangely included. But people who knew him after 1995 often sensed a difference, not in the act itself, underneath it, an awareness that performance had always protected something real, and that protection could be both blessing and burden. He carried himself differently after Dean's funeral, like someone who had finally spoken a truth he could no longer hide behind jokes. And there were no more Dean Martin roasts, no more needed to be. If you ever revisit those old recordings, the roasts, the variety shows, watch carefully for the moments Rickles catches Dean off guard. Watch Dean's face. Watch the drink lower before the laughter escapes. You will see exactly what made their friendship so unusual. And you may understand why that chapel became so quiet when a man who never ran out of words finally chose to stop the machine. If this story brought back a memory or gave you a new perspective on Dean Martin and Don Rickles, share your thoughts in the comments below. I always enjoy reading what these stories mean to you. And if you enjoyed spending time here, don't forget to like and subscribe. It truly helps the channel and lets me keep bringing these stories to life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.